Great. So, welcome everybody. My name is Travis Longcar. I'm president of the Los Angeles Audubon Society and the program wrangler, we'll say. And just want to welcome everybody here tonight. Have an announcement or two. Um, we have a few bird walks and uh, field trips coming up that I just wanted to mention. Um, the third Saturday is Birdwalk at Kennethon State Recreation Area. It's led by Eric and Ann Brooks. We're actually here tonight, waving at you now. That's third Saturday, March 19th, 8 a.m. There's a beginner's bird walk on the 20th at Will Rogers State Historic Park. That's limited registrations because this is got to be a small group. And there's instructions either on our website, laaudubon.org, or Facebook, where you can text the talk leader for that. Next month, we have our presentation is going to be about migratory birds and the effect of light pollution and how light pollution affects a migratory bird direction. And of course, tonight we're going to be talking about where they are when they're in their wintering grounds. And then I especially wanted to mention Friday, April 29th through May 2nd is the 30th anniversary sage grouse trip or dancing chickens trip led by Mary and Nick Freeman up on DWP property up north of here in the southern Sierra. And so that is also a limited participation opportunity, and you need to sign up ahead of time. There's a small fee associated with that for 4 days of leading, and a chance to tick some things off your list if you'd like. So just wanted to announce those before we got on to tonight's conversation with Bill Wilson. And the other thing is the chat. I'm just checking if the chat is disabled tonight. Okay. So Bill Wilson is the founder of Birds and Beans Coffee, and he started it in 2008. He is by training at Syracuse and then profession a marketing person, and worked extensively both in New York and overseas on marketing and in television and programming over the years, and then came back and founded Birds and Beans. And so tonight he's going to talk about that process and why and how he got into that, what it means for birds, and this sort of really unique supply chain that they've gotten set up to minimize the environmental damage and in fact encourage bird habitat at the site of coffee production. And the way it will work here is he sent me his slides, and so I'm going to share my screen here and share the slides, and then let Bill take over, talk for a bit, and then really have a conversation about this business and what shade grown and bird friendly coffee means, how you can access it. And so let me get going here. We're going to share the screen. I'm going to do this, and hopefully nothing crashes. It's the great hope. Okay. So everyone will let me know. Also, so I will not be able to monitor the comments on Facebook during the slides because I'm sharing my screen here and you have to watch me going back and forth. But if you are watching us on Facebook, you can put your comments in there, and once we're done with the slides, we'll pick them up there. So Bill, I really want to appreciate, as we were talking beforehand, he's back in Massachusetts, south of Boston, and I want to appreciate you staying up late and welcome you to LA Audubon. So the floor is yours.
Great. Well, it's really, thank you very much for taking the time to talk a little bit tonight about something that I find endlessly fascinating. So I can talk a lot about it for a long time, but I'll try to make it relevant to our daily lives. Um, we In 2008, I was kind of looking for something to do, and I had just before then moved back to the United States. My wife and I lived in London for about 23 years and brought our children up there. And we came back every summer, but just to the same place, which hadn't changed a whole lot. And once I got back and started visiting my siblings and friends out throughout New England, I was kind of surprised. And I'm not a very good birder. I'm not a lister, and I don't do the e-bird thing really. But I've always, like all of you, watching birds all the
36.
time. And yeah, I sort of had this feeling that there weren't as many birds around as there used to be. And then I picked up a book that a fellow I know, Scott Weidensaul, wrote called Living on the Wind. And he talks about birds and coffee. And I remembered back in the 80s, I had heard about this idea of shade grown coffee and it being better for the planet and better for all of us than just any coffee. And so I called Scott and he said, oh, yeah. He said the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, which is part of the National Zoo, was doing a lot of research on migratory bird populations, neotropical birds particularly. And, Russ Greenberg, who's sort of the father of this certification and this idea, who's sadly no longer with us, had done a lot of his graduate work in Panama. And he said, and there were a lot of theories about why birds like the wood thrush, Baltimore oriole, scarlet tanager, all of the wood warblers, almost all of the wood warblers, the vireos. There's about 200 birds that really qualify as coffee birds in the passerines category, and then there's the frogwings, hawks, and the sharpies and the kestrels. But Scott said, yeah, there's this whole thing about, coffee that's happening, that's compounding what's happening with forests. So here's the situation. If we go back to, say, just pick a date, 1960, the year I graduated from grammar school. Almost all the coffee in the world, we concentrate really on the Americas. I don't know very, very much about coffee outside of the Americas, but all of the coffee that was grown in the Americas was basically coffee that was grown in a forest. And it had been that way for about 300 years, maybe a little bit more, when Europeans and the Dutch claim they did, the French claim they did, the British claim they did. But some European colonials brought coffee bushes, coffee trees, into Latin America and found that there were really great elevations, great weather cycles for coffee. And coffee, historically or naturally, is a shade-loving plant. And it lives in symbiosis with forest trees and forest shrubs and other forest flora. And so the farmers and the settlers and the local people started growing coffee there, and it's done very well. And it became the second most important export from Latin America, legal, after petroleum, and it still is. It's a massive cash crop for Latin America. So Russ and a colleague of mine, Bridget Stutchbury, who's a professor up at York University in Canada, and Robert Rice, who recently retired from the Smithsonian, who's a geographer and had done all of his work in Nicaragua. Scott and I talked to them and got another guy named Kenn Kaufman involved. And we all figured out that the forest, the tropical forest, continues to be under threat. Keeping what we call the good coffee alive was a really worthwhile idea. And so I went around and I talked to about, I don't know, maybe 100 small coffee companies, some in person, a lot in person, and some by phone. And the idea was to sort of base ourselves in New England, New York, maybe the middle of that, and get a collective of local coffee companies, local roasters, to roast and sell one SKU, one roast at least of bird friendly coffee, and then push the certification and say, you know, roaster A in Worcester has bird friendly coffee, and roaster B in Orono, Maine has bird friendly coffee. Well, people that own coffee roasting companies, small and medium sized coffee roasting companies, like not to be cooperative. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they like their own businesses run their way. And the specialty coffee business, the orientation of the people that are involved in it is really about origin and taste and flavor and quality, and it's not really about the conservation side of things. So I met a husband and wife they were then based in Brunswick, Maine, who had a roasting facility and had their own brand. And I talked, and they were doing a little bit of bird-friendly coffee. They're the only people in New England at that time that were doing any bird-friendly coffee. So I spent some time with them, and we came up with this idea of, well, we'll start a brand because it'd be easier to sell a brand than to sell a certification. And so we decided to do that, and so we said, well, this will be really easy, because I'm a brilliant marketing guy. I worked with all the big companies in the world. I know everything. We'll start a brand, and in 3 or 4 or 5 years, it'll be pretty large, and it'll push other coffee brands and large coffee companies into supporting the certification. So I'm going to roll back just a little bit. When the Smithsonian launched the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center's bird-friendly certification, they came out about a year or two after fair trade entered the United States in a large way.
If it's a plant that normally is, I know, but they've genetically changed.
Yeah.
And anyhow, there was a cooperation in the beginning with several conservation organizations, and nobody could really figure out how to work together. And so I thought, well, this is going to be the right way to do it. But the certification had lost a lot of momentum. And when we started in the business, there were only 2 companies that were bringing any bird-friendly certified coffee up from Latin America. So we did a couple things. First of all, I talked to Bridget Stutchbury, who'd done a lot of work on this as a postdoc, and was the person who put sort of the microtransmitters on songbirds and did all the research on hooded warblers and wood thrush and their migrations. And she's got a patch in Pennsylvania that she and her husband, Gene, have been netting birds there for 35 years now. So, and they're doing population counts, and they figured out the migration routes and all that sort of stuff. Really fascinating. Anyhow, we said, okay, we'll start a brand because we've got to save the certification. Now it no longer became something good to do. It became something sort of necessary to do because the certification was almost out of business. And the people at Smithsonian, starting with Russ, were sort of, they were they're scientists, and the certification standards are really high and really strict. and you have to have a certain number of native trees. You have to have layers of trees, and they thought, well, we've done all the work here. Once everybody sees the science, they'll just follow it right out the door, and we'll sell lots of bird-friendly coffee. Anyhow, I think if we could look at the next slide, Travis, that would be great.
Yep. I took it down so I could make you larger on the screen.
Oh, okay,
So
thanks.
there we go. Okay,
Okay,
next slide. Let's
next
go
slide.
there. Next slide. Okay.
So this is where the science came in. So these men and women, scientists from the Smithsonian, did bird surveys across a large number of countries and a large number of farms, and looked at coffee that was grown in the sun, coffee that was grown in partial shade or shade of non-native plants, eucalyptus particularly, and then coffee that was basically grown in a forest. And it was very clear that in the bird-friendly shade coffee farms, we can find 200 migratory bird species and another 100, 150 indigenous species, not all on one farm, but in the coffee areas. And we've done several surveys with the people at Hawk Mountain, with people at York University, and with people at Organic Valley Farms, some of the scientists there, and we found just amazing numbers of birds, more than the scientists think should exist on wintering grounds, because the food is so rich in these farms that the capacity for these farms for wintering birds and indigenous birds is really quite extraordinary. I mean, I always say that when we go to visit the farms, I think they catch all the birds in the area and move them onto the farm, because the birds are all over the place at the right time of the year. So, pretty clear case that this is a real deal when it comes to bird conservation, and it's also a real deal when it comes to coffee. And then after about a year or two, I got Scott Weidensaul to help me, launch this business, to get involved in other people that were in the conservation sector. And, we've worked with Cornell and American ABC and a lot of different conservation groups across the country. And, we found that people just really didn't know about it. I mean, they just didn't know about it. They didn't understand where coffee came from. They didn't understand why there could be any implications for migratory birds. They couldn't understand why that our birds weren't just our birds. They were our birds and their birds. And in fact, they spent more time on the wintering ground than they do on the nesting grounds. So we realized, we had a really kind of a long educational slog in front of us. But it's sort of starting to work. And it has been for the last 5 years, working reasonably well. And in the meantime, the amount of coffee in acreage terms, in ground cover terms, that's in this bird-friendly shade type situation is now down to about 30% of the coffee territories, the coffee lands in Latin America. So, yeah, when I was in the 8th grade, it was 100%. And now I've got a grandson in the 8th grade, and it's 30%. And that's not a very good trend. And you'll, of course, all know, looking at the maps, how much tropical forest has shrunk around the world, but particularly in Latin America, over that same period of time. So we're in a kind of a fight here to hold on, keep places that migratory birds and indigenous birds can thrive, and wait until the world becomes a better place. And then the thing that really struck us, those of us who are involved in the daily grind here, was, but it's also about the farmers and what I call the local rural economies. So bird-friendly coffee is much more labor-intensive than sun-grown coffee. Now, the big coffee people have worked very hard to take coffee out of the shade. And now most coffee comes from large patches of farmland, monocultures, heavily fertilized, heavily insecticided, chemically fertilized, badly fertilized, and much less work. In Brazil, they've even brought over these machines that are used to shake olive trees to harvest, make the olives fall down instead of the old climbing up and the nets and the ladders and the forks and stuff. And yeah, so the old coffee lands are disappearing, but where we have been able to establish business, we and others now, with these local co-ops, because all of the coffee we buy is fair trade, which means it comes from a co-op, among other things. All of it is sort of at the heart of these rural local economies. So we buy the country we buy the most coffee from is Nicaragua, and I don't know if any of you have ever been to Nicaragua or what you know about Nicaragua. This is a country in a lot of trouble, and it has been for a long time. But it's got great coffee lands, and the legacy of coffee farming amongst the smallholder is very considerable. For historical reasons, Nicaragua wasn't really conquered and colonized as vigorously as a lot of other countries in Latin America. So there's a kind of a fiercely independent streak, and that's come through several times in these small communities. So in a town called San Juan del Rio Coco, which is up near the Honduran border just near the Rio Coco, which is the river that separates Nicaragua from Honduras, there are large numbers of coffee farms, and increasingly they've become bird friendly certified. After the revolution and after the Civil War, when they started getting back into coffee for export, because this is the heart of where the troops were invading from Honduras. Once they cleared the landmines out, they really couldn't afford fertilizer. And there were farmers here that, their families have been growing coffee for 100, 200, 150 years. So they had a lot of husbandry skills, and they were able to grow very good coffee very naturally. And then they began to get certified, and we helped them get into the bird friendly certification. And now this kind of remote part to what all of us is a remote country, is this thriving department, which is what they call a state, or a state, I would say, of Madrid, which sells a lot of coffee at very high price. So now that's the second key, really, to what we do. We pay a lot more money for our coffee than coffee companies pay. Last year, when coffee prices were lower, we were paying $1 more than Starbucks, $1 more than Nestle, the two biggest, $1 more than JAB, the three biggest coffee buyers in the world. And those companies, of course, operate under the mercantile system of they try to get the highest quality they can for the lowest price possible. And they love plantation sun-grown coffee because it's higher yields, more predictable harvest cycles, less workers, lower worker overhead costs, therefore. So in order to get bird-friendly coffee, you have to have a lot of trees. Means the coffee grows slower. It means the coffee ripens unevenly, so they have to have what they call passes, which means picking. You pick the coffee when the cherry's red, and it's really opened my eyes, and it's really opened the eyes of all of my colleagues that, wow, we're actually part of a supply chain that's good all the way through. It's good for the earth. It's good for the people that live on the earth. It's good for the people that work for the people that live on the earth. the folks that put it into containers and bring it up to Newark, New Jersey, or San Diego, are pretty nice people too. And all the people that work with us in the roastery are really nice people. So next slide, please, Travis. Thanks.
Sorry,
That's okay.
where's my mouse?
So this is what San Juan del Rio cocoa looks like. So what you're looking down on from a slightly higher elevation is coffee farms. So when they say now that and what we've all become used to, I think, is the idea of farms are monocultures, great straight lines going off into the horizon of soy or corn or wheat or whatever. And so in here is the coffee. In here are jaguars. In here are all kinds of birds and orchids and wonderful flora and fauna. And in here are people that are making a really honest living and living a pretty good life. And the one thing that happened in Nicaragua with the Sandinistas was they put in a much improved public education and public health system for the country. So you've got basically a farming community that's very complete because you've got a high-priced cash crop coming out of it year after year. So it's really an honor to be part of this, and it's really been gratifying to increase the volume of bird-friendly coffee that comes to the United States. Could we have the next slide, please, Travis? So we say now, I didn't invent this slide. A woman named Erica Rutherford, who is a member of the Golden Gate Audubon Society, who has a big coffee club that she runs, she and her partner John run, they put in a monthly order, came up with these 5 reasons to explain, and we've shortened them a little bit, but we're saving birds, we're conserving forest habitat, we're keeping toxic chemicals out of the ecosystems, we're supporting farm families and local communities, and we're preserving healthy microclimates. And for about the last 5 years, I've really begun to understand that most of the food we eat and most of the beverages that we drink could be raised this way if we wanted it to be. There's, the idea that's propagated, particularly by the agrochemical people and the big food companies, is you need technology to feed the world. And there's lots of papers now that indicate that that's not true. What you need to feed the world is a healthy agricultural system that doesn't kill things, getting it to our plate, including us when we eat it off that plate. So this has really been exciting, and it's been slightly successful. I always say to people that we're a for-profit conservation business, and my wife always says, "Well, Bill, I think that's true, but you don't have to put in the for-profit thing because we don't see very much of that." So that's a way of introducing the idea that you can't. I think when you start to run businesses to maximize margin instead of real genuine consideration of all the stakeholders, so the farmers, the workers on the farm, the people that handle the coffee, the people that bring the coffee from the warehouse up to the roastery, the people that roast it, the people that pick it and bag it and ship it, and the people that deliver it. You can have a system that really is friendly, and it's beyond bird friendly. So we recently introduced new bags, and we're doing a few things, kind of a semi-relaunch this year. And I think I'm regressing into my kumbaya years, but we're really featuring this friendly thing, and we really think that if you're friendly, if you think about people, if you think about birds, if you think about the people that you buy things from, and you think about the people that you sell things to, uh, you know, the world can really be a better place, as Jackie DeShano once said. So next slide, please, Trevor. So this is the certification now, the current certification for the bird friendly habitat certification that Smithsonian's putting on coffee. They're working on cacao. They're good people. They're really earnest scientists, and they slog away at this, and they protect the certification. So what I want to say about other certifications here is relevant to our overall theme as a company. The bird friendly certification, we always say it's the platinum certification for coffee, and it is. All of our coffee is also USDA Organic certified. That's part of a qualification to be bird friendly certified. You can't be bird friendly certified if you're not organic. And we're USDA Organic, and we're also fair trade certified. We believe in the fair trade, not so much the system, but the fair trade certification, because it does provide some protection for farmers. And so these triple certifications, make it that we have to deliver coffee that, hand on heart, is really good for the planet, good for birds, and then, by the way, last of all, one of the things we decided when we decided we're going to have a brand, we knew it had to be great tasting coffee, because why would you buy coffee just because it's good for birds? You have to buy coffee because it tastes good as well. And the last thing I'll say about that, we also realized that it had to be premium price, but not sort of premium price like very gourmet, coffee like wine sort of position, but just really, really good coffee. And we've been able to deliver to that. So now we really are pushing hard to get other people to compete with us, and that's working. Other people are competing with us. We're pushing hard to grow the business further. The pandemic has increased our business very significantly with the direct to consumer. Right now we have got about we have every month we sell coffee to people in every single state in the union, including Alaska, Hawaii, and we're in about 400 stores. We're in a chain called Natural Grocers, which is based out of Colorado, which has about 160 stores in the Rocky Mountain, upper Midwest states, stretching over a little bit like to Arkansas, and down to Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. And we also are in Wild Birds Unlimited stores. We have a good relationship with that organization. And in fact, when we started the business, we thought we were just going to be direct to consumer, but two women, really lovely people, a couple that own a store in Saratoga Springs, New York, came to us and wanted to carry the coffee. And so we said, okay, fine. And from that, and then when we were making presentations in New England about the coffee, when we started up, some of the co-ops were interested. So we're in a lot of Wild Birds Unlimited stores. We're in these Natural Grocer stores. We're in a lot of co-ops in the Northeast mostly. And then we're in a very interesting eclectic collection of mom and pop stores. One's a photography store that sells coffee and bird photographs. Some are just small grocery stores left mostly in resort towns or upmarket towns. And it's been a good journey so far. And I hope that over the next few years we can take it up to another level, and appreciate you all giving us some time to talk about it, to kind of spread the word about why this is good coffee. And the last thing I'll say about the certifications is we are also working with a a project called the Real Organic Project, which is a group of just under 1,000 farmers now, several in Southern California, that have banded together to ensure that to pressure really the USDA to be more honest about the USDA organic certification. So they've added a certification, a little bit like the non-GMO, to be real organic. So I think, when I talked to Travis about this, I thought we'd, talk for a little while and then have a discussion. So anything you guys want to talk about, I'd be happy to talk about.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that that introduction and walkthrough. So just how to engage in this conversation. You can unmute yourself and comment. Just go ahead. There's also a raise hand button. If you click on the what is it? There's a thing over on the side where you click on the people in the Blue Jeans app, and you can raise your hand if you want, or just unmute and go ahead and ask. And I thought I'd start, really, because I'm kind of fascinated. But first, I have to say that we've ordered and had this coffee for years. And not that this is meant to be a big advertisement for you as a commercial enterprise, but it's good coffee, and I can attest to that. But what fascinates me about this is how much your story here is really, even though it spans a couple of continents, or at least Mesoamerica to North America, how much it's really a local story. And in the fact that the decisions that are being made are very local ones. What are we doing here, and why are we doing it here, and how does it affect the environment in this particular place? And can you talk a little bit about that and the degree to which this process involves you actually knowing the people and places where the product is coming from, and how
Sure.
this is organic in a different way at the local level, not a national initiative or anything, that this is all very much a set of local stories that come together into this supply chain.
Yeah. So start with the farms. Okay, we visit the farms a lot, particularly Bob Garver, my partner in this, on the roasting end. He's an interesting guy. West Pointer, artillery captain, went into the coffee business in San Diego when he left the military, missed the family in the East, so they put a pin in the map and ended up in Maine, and they've been up there now for 20 years. And Bob goes down all the time, and we go down some of the time, and we send scientists, field scientists down to do bird surveys on these farms. And we also actually ran a set of bird surveys on organic farms in North America to see, birds here, birds there, and that was really very interesting, very, very rewarding. But yeah, so the coffee buying relationship with us is completely local. So we go down. Bob, who's really a coffee expert, sort of grades the coffee, for our use and for his other brand's use, and tells the people at the co-ops what we're looking for, what we need, what they have that we can use, and then with we use two exporters or importers, whichever way you want to look at it, that do the price negotiation. We set what our price standards are, and then the exporter who handles all the money and the paperwork and all that stuff, finalizes the contracts and the negotiation details. But all of these people are people. I mean, we talk to the farmers. We talk to Andrew at Royal Coffee. I talk to Bob every week or twice a week about the coffee, and he talks forever about the coffee. And then we go up and we see that we now have 4 people that roast coffee, and they talk forever about roasting the coffee. And everybody's really into what they do. I will say that the relationship with the farmers is interesting because it really is a commercial relationship. There really is, I've done business in over 85 countries around the world, and um, this is really much different than anything I've ever been involved in. These are people from the earth. These are people that are really rooted in their local community and in their farm and in their neighbors' lives, and we're really from very different worlds. But this kind of love of coffee, and for them, this deep necessity for coffee. I mean, one of the co-ops we buy from in Peru. Some of the farmers, the only money they ever make is from one pallet of coffee that we buy from them for a year. So selling that pallet at our high price is survival stuff. But it's all local. And then on these stores, if there's 400, I probably talk to 2 or 3 store owners a day. So we know personally most of the people that sell our coffee at the store level. And with the natural grocers people, that's more of a email communication. But we deal with the grocery buyer in all those stores. And they have a sense of their community. And then, of course, with these direct-to-consumer customers, we deal with 250 or 300 of them a day. And while it's an electronic relationship, a lot of it isn't because they have a problem or a complaint or an idea or something went wrong with an order or they're mad at the post office. And I've really now become deeply, deeply certain that small is better than big. And I've worked with some of the largest companies in the world, and I worked for a large company and ran a big part of it. And I started my own company and got not big, but it was biggish. But this community thing is really what's going to save the world. And it can be applied. Everything's all about scale and scale and scale. But that's not where we are. And it's great. So I think the community thing is terrific.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions that they want to ask?
Yeah, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, is there anything parallel to your efforts in Africa? Do you know of any similar projects?
Yeah, that's interesting. 2 things about Africa. I mean, there's some really good coffee that comes out of Ethiopia. Fair amount of coffee that comes out of Kenya and Tanzania. The coffee out of East Africa is controlled by quasi-government, quasi-public coffee organizations, as it is in Colombia and Brazil, and in a certain way in Costa Rica. And the workers, the coffee workers in Kenya, I don't know as much about Tanzania, but can't support it. We're not interested because of the birds anyhow. I mean, but it's a real thing. Good coffee farms are good for birds anywhere in the world that there's coffee and birds. Don't know much about the Chinese coffee. The Chinese are growing coffee now. Know that the Vietnamese coffee is mostly Robusta and not of a really top quality and heavily chemical. I think Africa in coffee, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. But there is coffee there, and it could do a lot of good on the ground because people are making a lot of money off that coffee. Just the people that do the work aren't making any.
Right.
Now, you mean tough in terms of what? Certifying the coffee as, well, you talked about the three-tiered certification process. Is that what you mean by tough in terms of tapping into that particular market? I have quite a bit of experience in East Africa, and I've in the course of birding and in other situations, I've actually been on shambas where coffee is grown, and I don't have wide experience here at all, but where I have been on coffee farms, nearly all the coffee is grown under deep shade situations. But as you say, coffee is controlled by local cooperatives, and I don't know to what extent that has changed. I suspect the cooperatives are still, we're dealing with small scale farmers, of course, as you probably are
Yeah.
in Nicaragua. And so they depend on the cooperative to sell their coffee, but then I do believe, or at least at one time, in both Tanzania and Kenya, I don't know anything about Ethiopian coffee, but that coffee was sold by the cooperative to these semi-governmental state organizations. So I don't know. Maybe that's what you mean by tough.
On the bigger farm, I know a little bit about Kenya and less about Ethiopia, other than the quality of Ethiopian coffee can be very good. But so you know what the problem. The problem in Kenya is, so the small farmer, okay, the workers are the owners mostly. Anything larger, some other person owns the farm and brings in seasonal workers, and it's not a great life, but it's what they have. But the problem is, any coffee that's exported, I think this is still true. I knew it was absolutely true 5 or 6 years ago. The coffee gets sold to a quasi-government entity that then sells it to the open market. So the difference between what people are paying for Kenyan coffee and what the farmer is getting from Kenyan coffee, the spread is enormous. And a lot of people don't. It would be very hard to find out what that spread is, if you know what I mean. You'd have to know a local farmer. You'd have to know what he or she really got for the coffee, and then you'd have to know the trail of that coffee till it got exported and what the person that ends up roasting it actually paid for it. Yeah. So there's too much obfuscation for us, but it's also not our mission. Our mission is our neotropical migratory birds in the Americas.
Yeah.
So that's a very poor answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting perspective from a marketing guy, right?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Mary Freeman, did you have your hand up? Are you still on?
Yes.
There we.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you went over this. You may have already, but is there any effort to get shade-grown cacao?
The Smithsonian is working on that, and in some of the co-ops, some of the farms even that we buy from, if they're at slightly lower elevations than we normally buy from, they have cacao. And also ABC was working on a cacao project in Colombia. So there's some movement in
ABC,
the
what's
Americas
that?
at least. Sorry?
ABC, what's that?
Oh, American Bird Conservancy.
No.
DC based. They're good. They're very focused on field, especially in Latin America. But
Anything with milk chocolate?
sorry.
Anything with milk chocolate?
The World Conservation Society has a project in Belize for chocolate made from their cacao, and we sold it. We sold it one Christmas in a kind of a co-op deal because we have our coffee at the zoos in New York City and the aquarium at New York City, which is run by the WCS.
Thank you very
The
much.
WCS has a bird friendly, has an animal friendly, farm friendly, community friendly chocolate set of chocolate bars. They're good too. They're really good.
Where else can I buy them?
Probably online. Go to the World Conservation Society, and they'll probably have some sort of a link for the. I can't remember what the brand name is, but I'm sure they'll have a link. Because they're also involved. They're doing some coffee in Bolivia that we're trying to work with them on. They're doing rice in Asia. I think isn't Audubon involved in rice in California?
Yeah, Audubon, California has a number of agricultural initiatives surrounding, flooding fields and whatnot for birds in Northern California. I can't
Another
speak to them
something.
exactly, but and thank you for that question. I was just going to also add that in terms of the coffee availability, there's a Wild Birds Unlimited on Wilshire Boulevard at the border between Los Angeles and Santa Monica that's carrying it now. And I forget if the Torrance one does. May or may not, I don't know. And then Pasadena Audubon has a club, right, that buys from you and distributes.
Yeah.
And then people can acquire it through your website as well, direct to consumer.
Yeah.
We can vouch for the Redondo Wild Birds having it because that's where we bought ours.
There you go.
Yay. Holby, nice. How do you like the coffee?
It's good.
Great.
Good. Thanks. I left my office in their bar and I left my coffee in the house. I've been dying to go back and get it. Now it's too late.
There you go.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, if I could.
Please.
Yeah, I'm just curious, the organic certification, that would apply to any flavorings that might be added to the coffee post-production, would it not? Vanilla, whatever extra?
Yes, yeah. Well, we don't, the only thing that's in our coffee is organic coffee. We had, I'm going to tell a slightly amusing story. There's a company called General Electric, and a crazy person who worked there decided that they use Keurig cups around the world in all of their facilities. And some woman that works in their accounting department decided that she was going to get bird-friendly coffee, not in K-cups because of the pollution, into General Electric, and we went through the dance of the cranes and took a year, and we found a way to do pods that were not plastic and they were compostable, and and we got the coffee in there, but they wouldn't put it in until we got hazelnut flavored coffee because apparently that was one of the. So we had to find organic hazelnut flavoring and put it in the coffee, and then General Electric sold the businesses that we were piloting, and so 3 years worth of work went down the drain in about a minute and a half.
Oh.
The other thing that about flavoring, we tried to one of the farmers that we buy from, a small farmer that we buy from in the south of Managua in Nicaragua, is growing a lot of vanilla, and so we tried put it, and it's really, really good. Vanilla is a really interesting crop. And we tried putting that in the coffee, but nobody liked it. And so apparently some people drink vanilla flavored coffee, but the guys in Maine, the men and women in Maine, just practically threw me out of the place.
Really?
Trying to introduce this thing that doesn't taste like coffee, but the vanilla is quite
I wouldn't
nice.
be thrown out. That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite.
Where can I get this?
Coffee shops I go to serves vanilla. That's one of their two brands they serve.
Yeah. I liked it. And
Where
this
can I get
vanilla is really, really good.
Where can I get this organic shade grown vanilla?
I don't know. I don't know. Jefferson Shriver, the man whose farm grows it, sells it into Europe. Europeans pay more for coffee than we do. So a lot of the good Latin American farms have been selling into Europe more than here.
Does the hazelnut brand still survive?
Sorry?
Does the hazelnut brand still survive? Is that still
No.
available? No. Okay.
No. Trying to think of, is there any other bird-friendly coffee company that does hazelnut? Thanksgiving coffee might do hazelnut.
No. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a text here from Mary Freeman wasn't able to get unmuted. She says, have you approached Pete's Coffee, which is her favorite?
No,
And chains in general, how does they have
okay.
their
So
own
Pete's is now owned by a company called JAB. JAB owns Pete's, Dr. Pepper, Keurig, what's the big donut?
Duncan?
No. I'll think of it. Anyhow, JAB is a European-based company.
Randy's Donuts?
Sorry?
Is it Winchell's or Randy's?
No, not Randy's. No, I'll think. Anyhow, so JAB now owns Pete's. Okay, Pete's was a great coffee company. They do a good job. I like their coffee, but they're part of this JAB. These guys, I know some of the top managers because some of the top managers come out of Procter and Gamble, which was a client of mine for a long time. These guys are killers. They're killers. They're absolute killers. I mean, they know how to make money and they focus on the margin. So I think Pete's kind of invented the specialty coffee business in the United States, and they still have a very good brand, and they have supermarket distribution, but they don't have any bird-friendly coffee.
And I guess the same would go for chains in general, like Starbucks.
Starbucks used to be the biggest buyer of fair trade certified coffee in the world, and they won't buy any certifications anymore. They've got some hokey certification thing they do. It's all greenwash. Nestle has a certification that they also do, which is less greenwashy, quite honestly. Nestle's kind of interesting. You know, they're just like really conservative people that act, but they're not thoughtless, if you know what I mean. And so they're probably better, although the world's biggest buyer of cacao and cacao harvesting is, a disgrace. I once sat in on a meeting with the then president of Nestle 2 days after the BBC did a documentary about child work in coffee and cacao farms on the Ivory Coast, and this guy said he'd been to the Ivory Coast 30 times and he'd never seen an incident of a child working on a farm. He never said he'd been on a farm, so I don't know. He probably wasn't lying. But Nestle, we pushed Whole Foods. We and Cafe Ibis spaced out. Cafe Ibis probably has hazelnut coffee. Yeah, Cafe Ibis has some flavored bird-friendly coffees. That's Cafe with 2 Fs. We pushed Whole Foods into the bird-friendly certification. Our brands were doing pretty well, ours in New England and theirs out in the Western Coast, whatever they call their division. And then they have one bird-friendly SKU. It's called Early Bird. And so they're Allegro Coffee. They own Allegro Coffee based in Boulder. And yeah, but they squeezed us out. We wouldn't. It's a long story, but you can get bird-friendly coffee at Whole Foods. It's called Early Bird, and some of it comes from it's a blend of Nicaraguan and Mexican coffee. It's not bad. It's not awful. At least it's bird-friendly.
Anybody else? Perfect. What I'll do, just so you know, we'll go ahead and close out the broadcast here on Facebook. Thanks for everybody attending that.